fear or favor. Let us do the elections according to the Supreme Court judgment. Let us not write our own Supreme Court judgment. You know, the street Supreme Court judgment being said in public rallies that our elections were wrong and they were... You know, it's very painful when people read a different script from what we saw.
All right. Francis Maina, and of course on the split screen right now we have Mombasa. There are some demonstrations in Mombasa. In Kisumu is still terrible. The news from there is that the demonstrations that were turning a little violent are still being that same way, and we have policemen running around with the demonstrators. That is the main street of Kisumu, Oginga Odinga Street. That's barricaded by stones. The cars are still there. Probably there's no destruction, but they are running battles in Kisumu. Yonder we can see some smoke, and we saw tires being burnt a little earlier. Peter Mwangangi will be reporting from Mombasa now that the demonstrations have also begun in Mombasa. In Nairobi, Kennedy Mureithi is at the anniversary, was making his way to the Uhuru Park. We'll be speaking to him, but let me give George an opportunity also to comment. George, looking at what's happening in the country in the face of these demonstrations, and obviously you see a lot of action in Kisumu, and we expect the police to act in a certain way if they're provoked. Is this what the people who called for these demonstrations anticipated?
I think, Ken, let me not look at the merits and demerits of not having the elections on 26th as demanded by the opposition. I think that is their right, constitutional right, because the Constitution, Article 37, allows for peaceful demonstrations. But what we are seeing happening on the screens is that these demonstrations cannot in any way be considered to be peaceful. We've seen a lot of intervention by the police. We've seen a lot of tear gas being used by the police. I don't know at what point these demonstrations turned into riots. I think this is something that we need to look into seriously. And for this country, as it is happening right now, I think we are stepping into dangerous waters, and we need to change direction. Because if we're having people on the streets every other day demonstrating, and then we are not sitting down and saying, why are we having these demonstrations? I remember in 1990, people were picketing and they were saying Section 2A must go. And it took the intervention of the president himself to sit down with his cabinet and say, if this is what is causing problems, then let's go multi-party. I think we should buy from that book. Let the people who are concerned sit down and agree on a way forward. Because whether you're in the opposition or you're in government, these demonstrations are not something that we can say is selling out Kenya in a very big picture. And remember, these policemen are also human beings. At some point, fatigue will come in. For how long can we sustain police presence on the streets? We must look for another solution.
Okay. And that solution, because we know even demonstration is constitutional.
Yes. Yes. We must look for a solution.
We just talked about Article 37. We talks about assembly, demonstrations, picketing, and presenting petitions. You know.
Yes, it's allowed.
In your mind, as we conclude, in your mind, what is this alternative that we should look for?
The alternative is dialogue.
Okay.
Because if we don't have dialogue right now, you are going to see these demonstrations on the street every other day. I remember during Sabasaba, we started with Sabasaba in Kamukunji. The next day, we were being deployed to Mathare. It went like that for more than 4 days.
But how do you...
And even us, we're getting fatigued.
Fatigued, saying, yes, because you're also human, just like the demonstrators.
Like the demonstrators.
I said all end, but I'd like to ask you, when you speak about dialogue, and one party is being invited to the table and they're walking out, because NASA walked out of the dialogue, how else would they be brought to the table?
I think there are reasons they're giving why they walked out of that dialogue. You know, I'm not a politician. I don't want to get so much into that. No, but I tend to think that the only solution that we have right now is not using brutal force on the demonstrators, but having our leaders sitting down and agreeing that Kenya is greater than us. And remember, one time Saitoti said, yeah, the country is bigger
than an individual.
All
right, thank you, George. And let's take you to what's happening, because that's where you want to see what's happening. And we begin with Kisumu. Mombasa is fairly peaceful. We can see even ladies in their buibui and young men and women on the streets, but it's fairly peaceful in Mombasa. In Kisumu, we can't say the same. That is the main street of Kisumu, Oginga Odinga, and there is that kind of demonstration. And if you look at besides the roads, there are people with parked cars. It means they're ready for the day, and this demonstration is catching them off guard, probably. Look at the number of stones that are on the road and the security personnel. Let's take you to Kisumu and listen in. Right, live pictures from Kisumu, the county of Kisumu. Professor Peter Nyang' Nyong'o is the governor of Kisumu County. The shop fronts along Ogingodinga, the busiest street and the main street of Kisumu, is closed. No business going on, probably for the better part of the day, and this will be repeated on Friday as the residents there take to the streets to protest the continuous stay of the IEBC officials who were almost indicted for what happened during the election. A lot of tear gas in Kisumu. Our journalists are on standby, will be reporting live, telling us what's happening exactly. But it looks as though there is no activity in Kisumu. Earlier on, we saw the police and the demonstrators running around the road leading to the upmarket Milimani estate, and obviously other parts. We are yet even to find pictures. This is main town. We are yet to find pictures from Kondele and other parts of Kisumu. And of course, we'll be getting there. And on your split screen also is a picture from Mombasa, where there are also very peaceful demonstrations, just young men and women taking to the streets. We'll try and speak to Peter Mwangangi about what's happening in Mombasa, and definitely we'll be coming back to Nairobi to speak to Kennedy Mureithi about what else is happening in Nairobi, and especially Uhuru Park, where they are telling us there's a lot of police presence. But